Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this video is going to be a quick video on how to make an API with PHP. Okay, I mean it's actually pretty easy. Now, in this video what I'm doing is I am doing an API in PHP using just PHP. No, I'm not incorporating Apache. So just to kind of give you some background, there are different versions of PHP. You use most online services. They're probably using somewhere in the fives. The newest is like 7.4, which is what I got. But when you're installing it locally in your local environment, so I'm running Linux, so usually you have PHP right out of the gate, and you have some version of PHP. I've upgraded mine to the newest. And a lot of times what people will do is when they want to develop in PHP, they download a tool called XAMPP. XAMPP is a tool that stands for it's basically a LAMP stack environment. So what it does, and LAMP stands for you're using Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So Apache is a web server. PHP is the language, and PHP is a really interesting language because it's essentially like a templating language smushed up with an actual programming language, all wrapped up into one. You have MySQL, which you could use Postgres or other databases with PHP and Apache, but XAMPP has that kind of configuration out of the box. So when I've wanted to use Postgres in the past with XAMPP, because Mac users, they have another tool called MAMP, but that's only on Mac. So it's Mac, and then Apache, MySQL, PHP. XAMPP is on Windows and Linux. Their tool, their tool actually has Postgres. So why do they call it MAMP? Interesting. But yeah, my point being is that when you're configuring XAMPP to use Postgres, it's actually a little tricky. What you have to do is you have to go into where the XAMPP install is, because it actually installs a separate version of PHP. It has its own install that it's running when you run the XAMPP server. It's usually like in the 5 version. Okay. And the reason I just point this out is because some people will be using PHP through XAMPP and some people will not. And I want them to be aware that when they configure these files, that there's probably 2 installs of PHP on their computer. And when they're running XAMPP, it's running a different install than if they were just running PHP commands in the terminal. Cool. But the thing is that with Apache, you have these things called .htaccess files that help override requests to the Apache server. And with that, you can use things like URL parameters and regex and do all sorts of really cool stuff. Now, I think PHP out of the gate, there isn't really necessarily like a built-in way to do that. I mean, you could kind of put that logic into your code, but there isn't like sort of a out-of-the-box way to handle URL params. So in that case, the easiest way to build an API is using URL queries, and that's what I'm going to do today. So again, that's just a little background for all that stuff. So I'm going to create a new folder, just called, first API. Okay, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to create a composer.json file. This is just if I want to deploy this to Heroku, even though I'm just going to leave it empty. The composer, that's funny. Rename composer.json, because composer is the PHP equivalent to Node. So in the sense that like there's Node package manager for JavaScript, there's composer for PHP. And that composer.json file would list your dependencies. And while I'm not going to be using any dependencies because I'm going to do this in straight PHP, having that composer.json file means when you upload it to Heroku, Heroku will automatically pick up that this is a PHP project. It'll automatically run it via a Apache server, and it'll just work. Okay, so it's just there for her, so Heroku knows which build pack to use. Although I do encourage you to learn how to use Composer, so that way you can use cool frameworks like Symfony and Laravel and a lot of other cool PHP libraries. Okay, so new file, index.php. I'm going to keep this real simple. Okay, and again, whenever you have like a static server run by Apache, basically the order of priority is that when it looks inside of a folder, it's always going to, I think it prioritizes index.php first. So if it sees an index.php, it'll render that to an HTML file. Then it'll look for an index.html, and if neither of those are available, it then just kind of shows you the file system. So just so you can understand like a behavior. Although I'm going to be just running a straight PHP server from the PHP command line, which should behave for the most part the same way. Okay, so essentially what I'm going to do here is that you can create a statement. Now, it's been a while since I've done PHP, but there is a variable. Let me go, I think it's get. So let's see here. Let's just do a var. Well, first we got to do our PHP tag. Okay, so again, every PHP file always has to start like this. And again, keep in mind, it's probably been like 6 months since I've written any PHP code. So let me see, that doesn't, yeah, I guess that's fine. Okay. That's not sitting right with me. Was it an exclamation point? PHP. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Oh, yeah, it is. It is that. It's a question mark. Oh, but I put $signs. That's why it's complaining. There we go. That looks better. Okay. Yay for syntax highlighting, for being a good tip off to something not being all set up. Okay, cool. So then we're going to use Var Dump, which is a function for, I think it's just lowercase, Var Dump. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it $_get. Okay, and what this does is that it's going to pull up the URL query, and I'll be able to pull up different queries from the URL by putting in the key here. So we'll say cheese. Okay, and then I need to put a semicolon, because every statement needs a semicolon. Okay, and then that's going to be it for now. Point is, I just want to show you how to get URL queries. I'm not going to build like a full CRUD thing right now. So new terminal, I'm going to cd into first API, and then the command to start a PHP server. So again, if I do php-v to see what version of PHP I have PHP 7.4.3. So that should be pretty much the newest or close to the newest. So I have all the fancy things like arrow functions and spread operators that are kind of recently added. Cool. Now on top of that, let's see here. You would do php-s, so that means serve, and then I would type in localhost. We'll say 4000 is where we'll serve it, and I hit enter, and that should serve. And there you go. Development server localhost 4000 started. Okay, now I'm gonna open up this, follow link. Okay, see right now it's null because there's no query. So let me add a URL query at the end of the URL. So again, a URL query always starts with a question mark. Then we type in the key, which in this case, I'm pulling the key cheese, so I might as well use cheese. And I'll just go with cheese equals Gouda. Okay, and see, there it is, string Gouda. Okay, so the point is, I can pass API, so any data you would normally pass via, let's say, a URL param, like the ID of an item, or the index of an item, or form data, can pass in through query for the time being. Okay, cool. And then there's the method. Let me just see if I can do this off the top of my head. Var dump. I forget if this is a function or not, but I think it's pretty sure it's underscore method. Yep. Okay. And that'll give us the method. So now if I save that, and I refresh, method, no. Maybe it is a function. Let's try that. Nope. Okay, let's Google it. Global to get request method, because mainly these are the two pieces you need to do an API, and I should have specified PHP, but yeah, there it is, request. Okay. Here we go, server. I think this is what I want. Request method. Okay. So it's actually part of this variable, because the server I think tells you all the stuff about the request. So let me hit save on that. Let's go back to our request here. And there, yeah. So see there, you can see it's a get request. The point is, these are the two things you can use to make your API work. Okay? So then in that case, if I want them to go to... So in that case, if I want the URL to be for... So let's say this first index PHP is just a main page, and then I want to do a folder called new folder API, and then I'll make a copy of this there, paste. Now the URL would be 4000 slash API, because it'll go into that API folder, so just to understand how the server works. So it'll go to that main folder, but since I specified API slash, it goes into the next folder, and we'll work off the index.php in there. So I could put all my API data, use like ifs and switches to determine saying, okay, if this is the request, do this, use the URL params in that way, and then you have an API, and it can return JSON data. Okay, I'm not gonna get into all the functions to parse your JSON data or stringify your JSON data, but the point is, like, it's not particularly hard. You don't necessarily need a huge API framework to create a PHP API. Probably out of all the languages, I would say creating an API just using the bare language API is probably the easiest in PHP. The reason is because PHP was built for the web. It was built with this sort of specific kind of use case in mind. It's a language specifically for creating back-end logic. That's literally all PHP is for, which makes it, since it's so specialized, it can make certain things pretty easy. And they've added a lot of cool syntax to PHP over the last several years. So yeah, no, PHP is pretty cool. And again, there's a reason why PHP still is fairly, even if it gets a lot of slack from some people, it still dominates the web. You still have more websites running PHP in their back-end code, even if they're not necessarily coding it, because again, if you're using WordPress, that's PHP. If you're using most web services that use like cPanel, that's PHP. But at the end of the day, it's still sort of a dominant player and a great thing to know and be familiar with. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.